luck is to finish chapter 1 today, because we've been there for a little while. That's okay. This is my first semester teaching with a new book, and this book is a little bit more in-depth than the old book I used to use. So the chapters are a little longer. That just means it takes a little bit further to get through them. Now, guys, I went through everybody's environments of business. Everybody who submitted, I gave you feedback. A couple of you were a little off in your environments. If you have questions, hit me up. I want you to understand that nobody did bad on the assignment. Everybody did reasonably well. On the LinkedIn stuff, I'm about 5 profiles in out of the class. I've got about a quarter of you getting feedback so far. Your profiles are looking great, guys. People are picking good things to listen to experiences, good pictures, good headlines. I made some suggestions to a few of you. Here's the rule. Look at the suggestions I made. They'll be right in the feedback on Canvas. Make the changes. Get back to me. Either email me, email me and tell me you made the changes, and I'll give you full credit for your LinkedIn profile. Everybody here should get a 10 out of 10. Yes, sir.
Do we have to do that for the environments of business one too?
Now, environments of business is what it is. So, yeah, so you don't have to redo that. Yeah, don't resubmit that one. But if you have questions, I'd love to make sure that you're cool with the feedback. But everybody's getting a 10 out of 10 on LinkedIn if we can help it. Okay? But everybody, honestly, I gave out a whole lot of A's on the environments of business, too. If you're late on either of these, though, now is the time, guys. I'm going to be jumping back in. We left off talking a little bit about supply and demand. Well, what we're going to be getting into today is how we reach equilibrium in the markets. Why products cost what they cost. Why is a pair of Air Jordans more expensive than an average pair of Adidas running shoes? Exactly right. And what does Michael Jordan's reputation make those shoes do? What does it make them? They appreciate. They're more in demand. And do they make massive amounts of each style? They limit production. They do that intentionally to make the price go up. So we're going to talk how this stuff crosses over, what equilibrium point is all about. This is the root of supply and demand. Here's a simple, this is right out of our text. The simple thought is, okay, if we have a snowboarding jacket, something maybe that's Gore-Tex, something really lightweight, maybe we can sell a few of them, maybe 200 for 175 bucks. But if we bring the price down to right around 100 bucks, we can sell as many as we want to sell. So you can decide as a manufacturer, do we want to operate on volume? Do we want to operate on price? And it's different per product. Let me give you an example. Can anybody tell me, if I decided today, at the end of the day, to drive to my local Ford dealer and say I want an F-150, what am I paying for that truck? For a nice basic F-150. What am I probably looking at? Oh, keep going. To get a decently equipped F-150, I'm going to be going between $45,000 and $60,000. Well, let's say, for example, I don't want to go for the F-150. I decide I'm going to go for something a little bit more conservative. I'm going to go for a Ford Focus, their sedan. What am I going to pay for one of those? Maybe 20 to 25, because nobody's buying sedans these days. Everybody's buying SUVs and trucks. Well, there's something else to that, though. The profit margin is higher on the truck than it is on the car. So we intentionally build in, are we going to sell volume or are we going to make higher price points? Why can I ask a higher premium for the F-150? Why can I put more of a markup on it? More demand. Exactly right. People are willing to pay it. We're still trying to find what the ceiling is for pickups because, my goodness, we're seeing $85,000 Jeeps. The world has changed. So we decide how we're going to do this stuff. If you're Ford Motor Company, you're making smaller margins than BMW because BMW is selling on what? Why do people want Beamers? It's the name, it's the reputation. So we have different price points, and different companies will have different places where the supply and demand peak out. So, for example, if we get to the $100 price point for this jacket, we can sell about 800 of them as opposed to $600 or $400 in a week, and we're getting more volume sales. If that's where we want to be, if we can make enough supply to meet demand and that profit level is good for us, that's what we're going to do. It all comes down to example, how much you want to make per sale. Again, to use one more car example, if you buy a Lamborghini, that car was built by hand and you're starting at around $500,000 to $600,000. If you're buying a Ford F-150, it was built in the factory and starts around $45,000. Again, we're going to sell fewer Lamborghinis, but that's not our goal as volume. Our goal is to sell and to maintain a brand. This stuff all fits together, guys. So here's what also happens. If you want to know, for example, why, for example, you go to TJ Maxx or I'm trying to think of the other discount. Yes, Marshalls. TJ Maxx, Marshalls. Why can we get really good deals on clothing? Why does it end up there? It was the wrong color, the wrong fit, or the wrong time. If you can get there at the right time, you might get a good deal. But we found out we were charging too much. This stuff languished on the shelf, and all of a sudden we're discounting it to get rid of it. So if we lower the price too far on a quality good, a couple of things can happen. People can make a run on it and buy more of it, and we'll have a shortage, or it can actually devalue the product. For example, if we started selling Nike Air Jordans brand new that were legit Jordans for $50 a pair, would that be good for the brand or not? What would happen to the brand? Yeah, because it's no longer exclusive. It's no longer desirable. The same token, if we charge too much for a chicken sandwich or Popeyes, it's too much. We need to maintain a specific price point based on what we're selling. So again, this is basic economics. And again, if we go for the $100 price point, we're doing okay. If we go down to 80, we might be selling so much that we run into a shortage. So this is supply and demand, guys. Remember this point. Where supply and demand meet at the level we want to sell is our equilibrium point. With me so far, guys? Okay. So, and again, these are just more graphs that show us the same thing. If we have an increase in demand, we can raise the price. If we have a decrease in demand, we've got to lower the price to peak sales. This is stuff you're going to get more of in Econ 101, so I'm not going to steal Ms. Donut or Ms. Seidel's or Dr. Seidel's thunder on that. But what shifts our desires for these things? By the way, to give you a point too, we refer to this as shifting to the right or shifting to the left. So if there's a decrease in demand standing in front of us, we're shifting to the left. I'm sorry, decrease in demand is to the left, increase is to the right. So if we're shifting to the right, if there's an increase in demand, if we're going right, price is going up. If we're going to the left, price is going down. You'll hear that in economics all the time. Has anybody ever heard those terms before? Okay. So to give you an example, we go to the right. If people have more disposable income, we can raise the price. Guys, if you want to know, for example, we had a really, really good economy for a couple of years. We can see it in all kinds of ways. What do people do, or what do people buy when they have disposable income that normally they might not buy? What might they do or buy that they don't normally do? What are indications that the economy is good? Yeah, we're buying recreational cars, buying new cars. Instead of waiting every 12 years to upgrade, we're doing it every 4 or 5. Cars, good one. What else? What else is a sign that the economy is doing well? Let's hear from this side. What's a sign that the economy is doing well? What's something we might buy or purchase or do more often? Yes. Exactly right. We're going to make that trip. We're going to take my wife and I go out for our anniversary every year. Maybe we're going someplace really special this year because the economy's good. This side, what's something else that you do maybe when you have a disposable income that you don't do when you don't? Jewelry. Yeah, that's a big one. Luxury goods. How about eating out? Eating out's expensive. Most people don't realize this, but it's a lot less expensive to make your own food. So if we're eating out more often. So to give you some examples, if we are moving to the right, we got consumers who have more money. We are going with what's changing in terms of our taste, for example. That means people have a changing taste in this country for trucks and SUVs as opposed to cars. So we're going to buy more expensive goods. If we think, for example, that substitute products, things we could buy, are not as good or they are price competitive, if the Ford F-150 and the sedan are similarly priced, we might go to the truck anyway because it's just a little more. Other things, guys, that take the cost down. Technology takes the cost down because we're producing things more efficiently. We're producing things with the machines. If we have a lower cost and supply items, we can pass that on to the consumer. What's the most expensive parts of your phone, for example? Yeah, let's say we found this massive deposit of cobalt in Pennsylvania. All of a sudden, we don't have to rely on unstable places in the globe for a cobalt. We can lower the price of the phone, for example. So there are things that bring prices down. If we have more suppliers, if we have more potential competition, the price goes down too. And again, anytime we reduce taxes. We reduce taxes, it gives us more consumer spending power. People are going to have more money to spend on things. So again, guys, in terms of the relationships between supply and demand, when supply goes up, prices typically go what? If we have more supply, price goes down. If we have more supply than we have demand, price goes down. If we have more demand than supply, price goes. Exactly right. The place where they cross over, what do we call that? Equilibrium point. Absolutely. Guys, I'm actually going to show you a video on Friday about why energy is changing in terms of price, because that was a question we talked about in the last class, why the price of gas is going down right now. And it has to do with all the forces we just talked about. So we're not going to talk about gas prices today, but we're going to bring these concepts back on our online Friday, because there's a video I think does a pretty good job with this. So if you hit equilibrium point, you've hit the cross-section of supply and demand. So we're going to talk next about market structures, guys. What the differences are between things like perfect competition and oligopies. Oligopoly is a strange name for something we all know really well. I want you to write this down or commit it to memory. There is no such thing as perfect competition. I'll say it one more time. There is no such thing as perfect competition. What perfect competition would mean is that, in theory, we are all equally equipped as companies or producers of goods and services to all produce products that will be equally competitive with each other in a completely fair and equitable system. It does not exist. I'll give you an example. Why is it more expensive to produce an iPhone in the United States than it is in China? What's the reason? Labor costs are the biggest part of it. Labor costs, access to natural resources, regulations in terms of, if you've seen the air quality in China is not as good as it is here in the United States. So it is impossible for us to set up a smartphone factory in the United States and compete at the same level that we would in some place like China. It simply does not exist. It is the capitalist dream that we could all be competitive. That's not to say give up on capitalism. That's to say that it's simply not perfect. Then we get into something called a monopoly. A monopoly means what? Yes? You got it. Can somebody think of a monopoly? Yeah. Yeah, I think that's the best example I could think of. Because right now, if you don't like the water service in your town, who are you going to? There is nobody else. If you don't like your natural gas service, who are you going to? Now, technically, they deregulated electricity in a lot of states. But let's say, for example, in this region, if Penelec owns all the power poles and owns all the actual infrastructure, you're still going through their infrastructure anyway. So it's one of those things. There are monopolies, and there are virtual monopolies too. I mean, people that technically aren't monopolies, but really kind of are. I want you to raise your hands if you've got more than 2 options for internet in your house. Internet might as well be a monopoly in most parts of the United States. I think the most recent statistics are about 75% of the United States has 1 to 2 options for internet. So does that give your internet service provider a lot of incentive to upgrade? Well, or to put one in, but let's think about this. If, for example, you live in my neighborhood and I'm the internet service provider, I'm the only provider of cable modem services, who are you going to go to if you don't get my internet? Nobody. So competition breeds better service. Monopolies make people complacent. Then we get into something called monopolistic competition. Here's what that means, guys. We got a lot of companies competing that appear on the surface to be different, but really aren't all that different. We have 2 companies that are big, major fast food chains for hamburgers. We got McDonald's and we got Burger King. Who here, if I said we're going to lunch at McDonald's or Burger King, you have to choose one of them. Who here would pick McDonald's? Who here would pick Burger King? I'd pick Burger King too. Is there really inherently much of a difference in the components that go into those sandwiches? It's processed beef, lettuce, tomato, maybe some mayonnaise, and a bun with a lot of sugar in it. Although they taste different and they're marketed differently. You know, McDonald's says, I'm loving it. I don't know honestly what Burger King's slogan is these days. There's not much difference between them. So that's what we refer to as monopolistic competition. Same deal with Coke or Pepsi. What's the number 1 ingredient in both? Sugar. high fructose corn syrup. You know, the stuff is like so bad for you. By the way, what's the deal? You guys don't really drink soda anymore, do you? Most people don't drink soda. You saw all of your parents get diabetes and get fat, and you said, we don't want that for ourselves. Then we get into something called oligopoly. And oligopoly means there are competing companies, but there's not a lot of them because the barriers to entry are high. In the United States, we have 3 major domestic manufacturers of automobiles. Who are they? Ford is one. Chevy, General Motors, yep. Yeah, Fiat Chrysler, Dodge. So we have a 4th company that's trying to take a toehold with American manufacturing. Who is it? No, they're a German company, actually. But they are manufacturing in the States. Tesla. Why is Tesla had such a hard time getting competitive? So they have a unique product, and the other part of it is they're very expensive. And why are they expensive, guys? Cost of production. And the other thing, too, have they reached volume discounting like the other 3 companies? They have not. It is very difficult to start a car company. It costs a lot of money. The barriers to entry are high. Anybody can set up a pizza shop. Anybody can set up a fast food joint. It takes a lot of money to start a car company. So perfect competition, basically don't even worry about it because it doesn't exist. We get into monopoly. The challenges there can be, for example, the government eventually might step in. Yes, sir.
What's the exact definition of barriers to entry? Is that just when like a company's trying to get in the marketplace? It's like a difficulty of it?
Exactly right. So, for example, a barrier to entry for Tesla would be distribution, because they've got limited factories and they don't have dealerships, really, not like traditional dealerships. Good question. Perfect competition doesn't exist. If we get into pure monopoly, eventually, if you are putting your customers over a barrel, if you're putting them in a bad spot, the government may come in and say, we're breaking your company up, you're a monopoly. It happened in the 1980s with the telecommunications industry. We had one company called Ma Bell, and it really was the Bell system of telephones that basically owned almost all the communications in the United States. So that was a monopoly. For example, when T-Mobile and Sprint wanted to merge, people were concerned about monopolies. We'll talk more about this sort of stuff. The biggest thing with monopolies is the consumer does not benefit because there's no competition. We get into monopolistic competition, it really comes down to flavors, for example. Flavors are slight changes. Some people, for example, might like Old Navy jeans. Some people might like Levi's. They're really made out of the same stuff. They're just a little different. Then we get into oligopolies. That, again, we're talking about cars. We're talking about major big manufacturers. Again, it's tough to get in. There is product differentiation, but there are high barriers to entry. Yes, sir.
Would soda companies be considered oligopoly?
I would put them more into monopolistic competition, because even though they're big companies like Coke. By the way, has anybody here ever been to Atlanta? Coca-Cola basically owns a big chunk of Atlanta because that's their headquarters. They're a big company. But there still is room for small companies to get in and compete.
Even with the size of like Pepsi?
I think Pepsi has a very big advantage, but I still would say that in terms of other companies, there's still openings. There's still openings for it. Like there's a company called James, for example, that makes pure sugarcane sodas. It's a very small company. And the same deal, like, for example, there's Anheuser-Busch, who's the biggest beer company in the United States. But there's smaller beer companies that can set up breweries. So there's still, the barriers to entry are low enough that a small company can still get in. It would be very tough for you or I to start a car company, for example. You guys with me so far? So, guys, in terms of market structure, what we're talking about is simply how much competition there is, how big the barriers to entry are. Is there such a thing as perfect competition? There is not. It's a myth. It's like the Loch Ness Monster, although the Loch Ness Monster is probably more likely to exist, or Bigfoot, than perfect competition. And in terms of oligopoly, so I disagree with our textbook here. The textbook says it's rare. I say it doesn't exist. The difference between oligopoly and monopolistic competition is what? What's the biggest difference? If we have an oligopoly, we have Coke, Pepsi, and James Soda versus perfect or monopolistic competition, Tesla, Ford, GM. What's the biggest difference? Yep, barriers to entry. Very good. You guys are on this today, guys. It's a Wednesday. We're in the middle of the week. It's hump day. It can be really tough sometimes. And you guys are making it kick ass today. Give yourselves a round of applause. All right. And we're going to keep going. Guys, I have to tell you, we were hitting a good stride in this class. We're going to finish today. We're going to finish this chapter strong. We're still going to let some time for discussion here as well. Guys, what we're going to be talking next is the changing kind of macro and microeconomic environments, and we're going to get a little bit into demographics right now. But I want to hear from you guys first. Right now, you guys are going to be entering into the workforce 4 years from now. What's different about the workforce you're going to be walking into than, say, the workforce of 50 years ago? What are some differences? Yes?
Way more diverse.
More diverse, but people from all kinds of different backgrounds. What else is different?
Well, there's not as many jobs because of how much technology is taking over.
So we got automation. I'm going to keep you on hot seat. What else is different than 50 years ago? Exactly right. So we have more women, and we have single parents of both genders. And we also have more people from different ages in the workforce that are making this a more complex environment. Let me give you an example, guys. I know I've said this repeatedly. Let's see if you remember. If you get that big job 4 years from now for $100,000, once you put your benefits in, what's it actually worth to the company? About $130,000. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, and yes, ma'am. So let's say, for example, we all work for the same company. You, me, all of us. What's the difference between what I'm going to cost the company ultimately and what you guys are going to cost the company? Well, exactly. More stuff breaks on old people. We get these things called comorbidities, for example, which means I have multiple things. You get to a point where you get so old, you're taking so many prescriptions, it looks like you're eating a bag of Skittles. That's how bad it gets. And everything hurts. You know what also happened? You'll have that day where you have that fall that you'll remember the rest of your life, because all of a sudden falls are no longer just falls, they're events. Trust me, you'll get there. The other day you'll die inside a little is when you hear your favorite song being played as elevator music in an elevator. When you realize the songs you grew up with have become music, you will die a little inside, but you're a long way away from that. But we're going to talk about this, guys. We got 5 generations of people in the workforce, in addition to healthcare and the fact that I'm constantly bitching and moaning about my aching hip. What else is complex about that? How could that be tough to manage 5 generations in the workforce? What might be challenging about that? Yes, sir. I guarantee if we were working in the same place, you'd be faster than me. I guarantee it. What else? What else is challenging? Yes? Oh, I like that one. Give me some example. Like, what might we think differently about? The old folks are complaining that their arms aren't long enough to see their phones. We're going to go to the back and then up to the front. Back. Ooh, tell me more. You're not going to get people over the age of 70 on WhatsApp very easily. Yes.
I was going to say, going on what Paige said, like an example that would be like newspapers. So if you have a whole bunch of people, younger people are going to want to be able to read the articles here, but the older people are going to want to produce more newspapers.
Yeah, that old person who's 70 years old who gets laid off, where are they going to look for their next job? In the classifieds, because that's the way they grew up. So yes, we've got that. We've also, guys, got this trend in the developing world right now. I've said it a couple of times in this context. Guys, what is going to be the big moving and shaking continent in the 21st century? You got it. Tons of resources, tons of intellectual capital, and a young population. So we've also got that wonderful possibility there, and we've also got this history of taking advantage of people. Yes?
You say that about Africa, like, do you mean like don't catch up to us?
I think it can happen. And here's why I think that. We look at the 5 factors of production. We're talking about intellectual capital. We're talking about natural resources. We're talking about means of production. If you want to talk about minerals and natural resources, Africa is swimming in that stuff. Yeah, the largest supplies of diamonds. We've got large supplies of rare earth elements that power all of our technology. We've got all of these things. And so I really feel that the generation that's coming out now, because in most parts of the African continent, the largest part of the population is under the age of 25. So you got young creative people who've grown up with mobile networks and technology, And I don't know about you guys, but I would also be questioning if I'm a young person with skills and abilities, I would want to see my country succeed too. I think a lot of folks in these countries are going to be more aggressive about entrepreneurship, maybe even than we are right now. We're getting aggressive again. That's the challenge. Because you've got things like tribalism, you've got corruption in a lot of governments, but you have young people who are saying we've had enough of this stuff. I think it can happen. I'm trying to be an optimist. And here's the other part too. Sometimes, Paige, are you going to add to that? Here's the difference. You guys are asking good questions. It's been more raw materials. It's been more things that we're taking out without putting things in. And a lot of folks are saying, well, why don't we just manufacture there now? So, for example, rare earth elements is a big part of it just because we use that so much in our technology. The textile industry, believe it or not, that's an indicator of progress in an economy. It's starting to take root in Western Africa. People are starting to say, why do we need to buy all this textile from India and China? We've got a really skilled workforce in Africa too. And there's entrepreneurs that are coming in places like Ghana. I'm trying to get other country that I just did some research on, well, and Guinea as well, who are starting to say, why don't we start pulling that business in? Here's the other part. And I'm on a little bit of a tangent here. It took a while for cell phones, for example, to take off in the U.S. Why did it take time in the U.S.? Because everybody was used to landlines and we had a good infrastructure. So I'm talking even before we had smartphones. In Africa, a lot of that infrastructure simply never existed. So it was easy to start relying on mobile networks. People inherently were more biased and more okay with using wireless technologies and spreading out over wide areas. As a result, technology is spreading more quickly in parts of that continent than it did in the United States. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. I apologize. I'm giving long answers to short questions today because you guys are asking good questions. Here's the other trick, guys. In the United States, we have a very small portion of the global population, but we use more of the energy than any other country, and that's going to be the big challenge in the 21st century. We've got limited sources of fossil fuel. We still have a lot of gas in the world, but it's not renewable. So we got to start looking at new ways to create energy. And also, in terms of the new economy, when I say new, I mean the emerging economy. What constitutes success? For example, we've been in a constant growth mindset. We need to sell more. We need to have larger expansion all the time. It cannot be perpetual. So, for example, countries may have to live with lower growth rates than we did in the past. So those are changes we're going through. Guys, I have a question for you. Is there an advantage, for example, to a multi-generational workforce? We talked about all these disadvantages. Is there an advantage? Is there something good? Yes, ma'am. I completely agree. I think there's a lot to it. Have you ever had to teach your parents or grandparents about smartphones? Absolutely, yes.
Like what she said, but vice versa. Like these days, my parents joke about it a lot. Like we don't know how to talk well. Like no one takes a phone call anymore. It's all texting. And, like the older generation knows how to do that stuff. So like when it comes to interviews or things like that, the older generation is going to be better than that. Simply like or it could come down to a simple handshake. Like they'll be better at that kind of stuff. That's in-person interactions.
I think you guys are nailing it. Is there anything else that we could benefit from a multi-generational workplace? I really do think we can all learn from each other. And in the current state we're in right now, in terms of all this conflict happening in our country, if you get somebody who's in their 70s or 80s, they've seen it before. They lived through the 60s. They lived through some of this turmoil we're in right now. So I think we can learn from the past. And the other part of it, too, older people are living longer, guys. Your generation, females always live longer than males. That's just the way biology works, generally speaking. The average female in your generation, how old is the average female going to live in your generation? Yep, mid-80s. Some studies are even saying we're going to see a lot of people making it to 100 years old. So that's challenging. It's wonderful because we preserve history and people get to enjoy life longer. But it's challenging too because our bodies weren't necessarily meant to last that long. So we've got healthcare that's going to be an issue. And the other part of it too, how many of you, by show of hands, believe at the current environment that Social Security is going to be around for your generation? Nobody's hand went up. So all of a sudden, we got to figure out ways to keep people employed and feed people who are going to be living an awful long time. And guys, we finished chapter 1 today, so thank you very much for being engaged. On Friday, we're going to do a little discussion, most likely about why the price of gas is so high. I got a video prepared for you guys. I'll be seeing you online. And hey, one other thing, I'll remind you this. Not this Friday, but a week from Friday, we're going to be having an Actus bonfire. We're going to be doing a bonfire and s'mores. I'll remind you, you're welcome to join us. It's going to be 7 o'clock, I think, behind Campus Ministry. I'll get you the details. If you're interested, please join us. Have a great day, guys.
Signed up yesterday.
Awesome.
Hunter.
Ah, Hunter, yeah, he's our lead marketing guy. Yeah, I think I saw his meeting. Yeah, thanks for signing up.